We trust strangers every day, sometimes without even realizing it. A knock at the door, a smile, a bag of food, and then they're gone. But what happens when that ordinary moment hides something darker, something you weren't meant to see or survive? Tonight, I'm going to share 3 true horror stories that happen to real food delivery drivers and customers. Stories that start with a simple order and end in terror, paranoia, and in one case, something much worse. These aren't just urban legends, they happened. And after watching, you may never answer the door the same way again. Story 1, the second container. It started on a Tuesday night, sometime around 8:45, when I ordered a chicken tikka masala from a local Indian place I'd never tried before. Mostly because the photos on the delivery app looked halfway decent, and I didn't feel like cooking after a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital. The kind of exhaustion where your limbs buzz and your thoughts lose their edges, replaced with fog and the slow ache of existing, so I scrolled through hanging out. Options, not really caring, just wanting something warm and easy, and when the restaurant, called Red Basmati, popped up with a 10% discount and a delivery estimate of 35 minutes, I tapped order without a second thought, not noticing the odd number of reviews, or rather the way most of them read like they were copied and pasted, repeating phrases like fast and hot and the best Indian food I've ever had in stilted, almost robotic language. But again, I was too tired to care, and I figured worst case, I'd choke down something mediocre and pass out on the couch. So I placed the order, turned the TV on low, and half dozed while watching an old episode of Forensic Files, letting the narrator's steady drone lull me into a half-conscious trance until my phone buzzed 42 minutes later with a text from the app. Your dasher, Samir, is arriving now, which jolted me slightly because I didn't hear anyone at the door. No knock, no doorbell, nothing. But I got up anyway, feeling the sting in my knees and the deep tiredness in my shoulders, walked to the front door and looked through the peephole, only to find no one there, not on the porch, not on the driveway, not even a car on the street. Just empty suburban quiet wrapped in dusk and the orange glow of the street lamp across the way, which didn't make sense, so I opened the door and stepped out, assuming maybe Samir had left the food and walked back to his car. But there was no bag, no receipt. No sign of any delivery having happened at all, just silence and the faint smell of cut grass, and I stood there confused, phone in hand, rereading the message as if maybe I'd misunderstood, when a second buzz came. Order delivered. Enjoy your meal. And I was about to text support when I noticed the door across the street, the one belonging to Mrs. Halporn, my elderly neighbor who hadn't left her house in weeks, was slightly open, just enough to show a sliver of dark hallway behind it, and for some reason that made the hair on the back of my neck rise, because she never left it ajar, always double locked, paranoid about break-ins in Nenida. And I stood frozen for a second, wondering if I should go check on her or call someone, when another buzz came, this time not a text but a photo, the kind delivery drivers sometimes send as proof of drop-off, but it wasn't my porch in the picture. It was a blurry, low-angle shot of what looked like a basement floor, dark concrete with a small trail of muddy footprints leading off into shadow. And my stomach flipped, because this wasn't some mistake or glitch. This was intentional, and before I could even start to process what I was seeing, there came a soft knock behind me from inside my house, followed by a second, louder knock, and I turned slowly, already dreading what I'd see, heart hammering as I crept back inside, checking each room, each door, convinced I'd find someone hiding, but everything was empty, untouched. The way I'd left it, except for the kitchen, where a single white delivery bag now sat on the counter, completely silent and still, even though I had locked the front door when I went outside, had checked the entire place twice, and that bag, plain, unbranded, with a slight grease stain on the side, had definitely not been there before, and I don't know what compelled me to approach it. Maybe some mix of hunger and fear and sheer disbelief, but I did, and when I opened it, I found not just my chicken tikka masala, but a second container I hadn't ordered, unlabeled, filled with what looked like raw meat, pale and stringy, floating in a thin red broth that smelled sweet and metallic, and something about that smell made my mouth go dry, made my pulse spike. because it didn't smell like food, it smelled like food, it smelled like copper and rot and something I should never, ever taste. But right then my phone buzzed again with a new message. You left your door unlocked. Don't worry, I locked it for you. And that's when I realized I could no longer hear the TV or the hum of the fridge or even the faint whoosh of cars outside, just silence, like the whole world had muted itself. And as I stood there, bag in hand, I saw movement through the reflection in the kitchen window, not behind me, but beside me, as if someone were standing just out of sight, their reflection barely visible in the glass, watching, waiting. And when I turned, no one, just air, empty and cold, but the reflection lingered for a moment longer than it should have, almost like it hadn't yet realized I was looking. And then it blinked out, vanished, and in its place was only my own pale, confused face staring back, and I wanted to run, to leave, but my legs wouldn't move, not until the power cut out with a quiet click, plunging everything into darkness except for the dim light of my phone screen, which now showed a new notification from an app I didn't recognize, something called Palette, which I'd never installed, its icon a perfect circle with a sharp-toothed grin etched across it. And when I opened, the screen filled with a live feed of my living room from an angle high in the corner near the ceiling, showing me standing in the kitchen holding the bag, and I dropped the phone, stumbling back, heart thundering, because there was no camera in that room, no reason any app should have that view. And before I could think, before I could scream or flee or even breathe properly, the smell from that second container intensified, filled the air with the dense, cloying perfume of decay and iron, and I swore I heard chewing, wet, deliberate chewing, from somewhere deeper in the house. Not loud, but unmistakable, like teeth grinding through tendon, and I forced myself forward, one shaky step at a time, clutching a kitchen knife I'd grabbed from instinct, moving toward the hallway, toward the sound, every shadow in the house seeming to swell and breathe. And the hallway stretched longer than it should have, impossibly so, each door lining it now slightly ajar, none of which I remembered leaving open. And behind each one, a different noise, sobbing, whispering, the clink of cutlery, the scrape of a chair, but I kept moving, unable to stop, until I reached the door to the basement, the one I never opened, the one that had been sealed since I moved in, and it was wide open, revealing stairs that descended into flickering orange light and a smell so strong it made me gag, and I should have run, should have called the police or screamed or something, but instead I started down like something inside me had already surrendered, already accepted that I wasn't in control anymore, and with each step the sounds grew clearer. Whispers repeating my name, utensils clicking on porcelain, and beneath it all, that slow, rhythmic chewing. And when I reached the bottom, I saw them, dozens of people, seated around a long table, faces blurry like overexposed film, limbs too long or too short, dressed in aprons with the red basmati logo stitched on, all eating, all chewing in perfect unison. And at the head of the table sat Samir, or what used to be him, skin sloughing off in places, eyes milky and blind, and in front of him was a plate piled high with meat just like the one in my bag, and he raised his head and smiled at me, and all around the table they did too, in one synchronized, bone-splitting grin, and I finally screamed, dropped the knife, tried to back away, but the stairs were gone, the basement gone, the whole house replaced with this place, this horrible dining hall that smelled like copper and death and something deeper, ritual, permanence. And then the lights went out and I was alone, except for the whispers and the sound of knives and forks and chewing, and I don't know how long I stayed down there, or if I ever truly left, because when I woke up the next morning, I was lying in my bed, the food bag gone, the app gone, my phone wiped clean, and when I tried to find restaurant again, there was no record of red basmati ever existing. Not on the app, not online, not even in the city health code database, but every night since, I hear that chewing again, just under the silence, and sometimes I wake up to find muddy footprints on my kitchen floor, leading to the basement door, which now opens on its own, slowly, like it's waiting for me to come back down. Story 2, Morrow Street Eats. It happened on a rain-heavy Friday evening, the kind that makes the world feel soggy and slow, where traffic turns to sludge and every errand becomes an ordeal, and I had just gotten home from a week of intense back-to-back meetings at the architecture firm I worked for. My brain still buzzing from client presentations, CAD software glitches, and the endless grating hum of fluorescent office lights. I was living alone in a small third-floor apartment in the historic district downtown, a beautiful but creaky old building that had character and charm, but also paper-thin walls, flickering light fixtures, and radiators that hissed like snakes when the temperature dropped, which it had, suddenly, dramatically. So by the time I kicked off my shoes and collapsed on the couch, soaked from a sprint through the parking lot, all I wanted was food, warmth, and silence, and maybe something mindless on Netflix to wash the week out of my skull. And without much thought, I opened the delivery app, ignoring the familiar chains and scrolling instead through the local joints, the ones I hadn't tried before, where the photos looked like real food instead of stylized plastic meals. And that's when I saw a listing I'd never noticed. Morrow Street Eats. No logo, no photos. Just a menu of comfort food staples, mac and cheese, meatloaf, grilled cheese, tomato bisque, and something about the name tugged at me. Pushing, neat. Familiar but wrong, and when I clicked the details, the address listed was just 23 Morrow Saint, which I knew for a fact didn't exist anymore, because that part of the street had been leveled 2 years ago to make way for condos, and yet the app showed it as open, accepting orders, even offering free delivery within 2 miles, and the reviews were strange, not bad, but unsettlingly vague. Things like fills you right up and tastes like it remembers you, and I figured it was some joke or ghost listing, maybe a pop-up kitchen using an old address, but I was too tired to care, and the idea of thick soup and melty grilled cheese was enough to make me hit order. Choosing the combo box with both and a side of pickled vegetables because that sounded oddly refreshing, and the estimated time said 30 minutes, but the doorbell rang in 13, which was impossible unless they'd already been rude and round. And I nearly didn't answer because I hadn't heard any footsteps in the hallway, no buzzing from the security door downstairs. But when I opened the door, the hallway was empty except for the paper bag sitting neatly in the center of the doormat. Heavy and steaming with the unmistakable scent of butter, cheese, and something vaguely herbal that I couldn't place. And there was no receipt, no branding, just a hand-drawn smiley face and thick black marker on the side of the bag, its mouth slightly crooked like a scar, and I brought it inside. Suddenly ravenous, not even thinking to question it further, and as I unpacked the containers, I noticed the grilled cheese wasn't made with the usual square bread slices, but something older, rustic, with jagged crusts and an uneven texture, like it had been torn rather than sliced. And the cheese was dark, almost orange-brown, with a smell I can only describe as familiar and alien all at once, like a memory you didn't know you had until it rises up in your throat and makes you want to cry. And the soup was thick, more like a puree. Its color somewhere between rust and dried blood, but the scent was intoxicating. Clove, thyme, and something earthy, deep, fungal. And despite every instinct in me whispering that this was wrong, that none of this was right, I took a bite, then a sip, and felt an immediate wave of comfort crash over me. Not just warmth, but a kind of emotional saturation, like the food was hugging something inside me I didn't know was cold. And for a full 5 minutes, I just sat there eating, feeling tears slide down my face for no reason at all. And when I finished, I felt heavy, sedated, full in a way that it felt cosmic, like I had been emptied and filled back up again with something bigger than hunger. But then things began to feel wrong. First, my vision, which grew sharp at the edges but blurred in the middle, like I was looking through water. And then the sound, which seemed to drop out except for the ticking of the radiator and the slow creak of the floorboards above me. Except I lived on the top floor and there was no apartment above, just the attic. And that's when the smell changed too, from comfort to copper, to rot, to soil thick with decay. And I stumbled to the sink to throw up, but nothing came out. Just a thick, wet cough that tasted like iron. And when I looked in the mirror above the sink, I didn't recognize myself. Not completely anyway, because my face was mine, but not. The angle slightly off, the skin too taut in places, too loose in others, and my eyes were wide, dilated, too dark. And when I blinked, I saw something move in the reflection behind me, just past the kitchen doorway, tall and narrow and wrong. But when I turned around, there was only the hallway, empty. Except now the bag from Morrow Street Eats was gone, vanished from the counter where I'd left it, and in its place was a note, handwritten on yellowed paper. we remember you. Story 3, The House That Ate My Root. It started as a standard Wednesday night shift. Overcast, cool. The kind of weather that settled in your bones and made you want to curl up on the couch with a hot meal. Perfect delivery weather. I'd been driving for this food delivery app for about 9 months. Again, not glamorous work, but it paid decently and let me stay away from crowded offices and fake water cooler smiles. I liked the solitude, the routine, drive, pick up, drop off, repeat. That night, I had just dropped off an order of pad thai to a smiling couple who smelled like weed and potpourri, and I was cruising through the hills on the outskirts of my town, waiting for the next ping. The delivery zone stretched into a half-forgotten cluster of aging homes tucked in a forested ridge known as Marrow Hills. An odd name, never thought much of it. Then came the ping, a ping, pick up at Mother India Kitchen, drop off at 1938 Elmridge Lane. It stood out immediately. Elmridge wasn't in my usual path. The system rarely sent orders that far north. I squinted at the delivery map, noticing how it meandered through steep winding roads and ended in a cul-de-sac that seemed to fold into the woods. The payout was high $38 for one drop. That was unusual. But maybe it was a big order. I accepted. Stomach growled. I told myself I'd eat after this one. Pickup was smooth. The staff at Mother India knew me, smiled as they handed over a large brown bag sealed with 2 red stickers and a faint waft of turmeric cardamom and something sweet I couldn't place. I secured it in the passenger seat and started driving toward Elmridge. The deeper I went, the stranger it felt. Street lamps grew sparser, houses more spread out. Architecture changing from modern suburban to antique Victorian and Tudor styles. It was like driving backward through time. The GPS directed me onto a narrow road flanked by high, skeletal trees. No other cars, no sounds. Just the faint shuffle of dry leaves scratching my windshield as the wind picked up. The turn onto Elmridge Lane was abrupt, like the road didn't want me to find it. As I made the final turn, I saw the house. 1938 Elmridge Lane. A tall, brooding manor half swallowed by the forest. Not old in the charming way, old in the forgotten, rotting way. Ivy veined up its stone walls. A single flickering light glowed in an upstairs window. No doorbell, no welcome mat, just a wide oak door, paint flaking like sunburnt skin. I hesitated. My phone buzzed. A please leave at the front door. That was all. No name, no contact. I stepped out, the gravel crunching too loud beneath my shoes. As I approached the door, something felt wrong. Not wrong in a horror movie way. Wrong like my body knew something I didn't, like it wanted to turn and leave before my brain figured it out. The air was cold, not in temperature but in presence, dead, stale, like a room sealed shut for decades. I set the bag down, snapped a photo for proof, and turned. The door opened. It didn't creak, it didn't groan. It just opened, smoothly, deliberately, like someone had been watching and waited for that exact moment. I froze. No one was visible in the doorway, just a long dark hallway stretching beyond the frame. I could barely make out the silhouette of something tall and narrow against the far wall, maybe a grandfather clock. Then I heard it, a breath, not mine. It came from the shadows just beyond the threshold. Long, ragged, inhale, hold, exhale. Hello, I called out. My voice felt wrong in that space, too loud, too small. We're Foods here. No reply. A footstep, one, then another. Closer now. I took 2 steps back. I'm just gonna leave it here, all right? Silence again. And then suddenly the door slammed shut. Violently, I jumped. The sound echoed unnaturally as if bouncing through a vast cathedral. I stumbled back to the car, breathing faster, adrenaline kicking in. I got in and locked the doors without thinking, but my phone buzzed again. New message, a thank you. Would you be able to help bring the drinks inside? I accidentally left them in the foyer. Big tip, I didn't remember seeing any drinks. No one mentioned drinks. The app didn't list drinks. I replied, no drinks were with the order. Sorry. The response came back immediately. They're inside, please, I'm very old. I should have driven away. But I didn't. The guilt got me. The money tempted me. The curiosity whispered louder than the fear. I got out and walked back to the door. It opened before I touched it. This time I stepped inside. The air hit me like a wave. Musty, metallic, and thick with a sweetness that didn't belong. The kind of sweet that came from decay masked by something floral. A sickening perfume. I saw the bag of food still untouched on the floor, even though the door had opened and closed. No drinks, but a light flickered to life further inside. A hallway lamp, then another, like breadcrumbs. Hello? I called again. My voice sounded hollow, swallowed by the tall ceilings. Nothing, just the tick-tock of that distant clock and the faintest shuffle of movement upstairs. Against better judgment, I stepped further in. The foyer opened into a parlor where the wallpaper had peeled in vertical strips, revealing crumbling plaster. Antique furniture sat coated in a layer of dust so thick it looked upholstered in gray velvet. A cracked teacup rested on a doily. Beside it, something moved. It wasn't a person. It looked like a mask. Propped up against a lamp, the eyes painted black, the mouth a frozen, toothless grin. I blinked. It was gone. I backed up, fast, turned. The door was closed and wouldn't open. I tugged the handle, twisted the lock, slammed my fist against the wood. No give. My phone vibrated in my pocket again. A thank you for coming in. We rarely get visitors. I didn't respond. My hands were shaking now. I turned to run down the hall toward the side windows. Maybe I could break one. But what I found instead was a dining room, set for one. A full plate of food rested in front of a tall wooden chair, the food from the bag, already plated, already steaming, but I hadn't brought it inside. And sitting in the chair was, I don't know. It looked like a person, but not quite. The proportions were wrong, the arms too long, the neck too rigid. The skin, if it was skin, hung in patches, loose and waxy like an old mannequin melting. The mouth was sewn shut with thin black thread. The eyes looked wet, but they didn't blink. It didn't move until I did. When I took a step back, it jerked fast. Its head turning with a snap toward me, I screamed, ran. My feet slammed the warped floorboards as I sprinted back toward the foyer, dodging under a swinging chandelier that hadn't been moving before. I reached the door again, still locked. I heard footsteps above, too many for one person. They moved in odd syncopation like a herd of deer on stilts, thumping and skittering across the upper floor. Then a voice whispered, right behind me, "You're the first one to stay this long." I turned. The mask was floating midair. No string, no hand, just suspended. It rushed toward my face, and everything went black. I woke up in my car, parked on a gravel road. The food bag was gone. My phone had no signal. The time said 3:33 a.m. I didn't remember getting back, or driving, or anything after that mask. I tried the engine. It worked. I floored it. I reported the incident to the app. They deactivated the delivery, said no such address existed in their system. The payout, gone, vanished. When I looked back at the order history, it had been deleted. I drove by Elmridge Lane a week later. It wasn't there. No turn, no street sign. Just a thick patch of woods where the road used to be. But sometimes on cold nights when the air smells like dust and old flowers, I still get notifications from a customer with no name, asking me to come back, asking me to bring the drinks. You never really know who or what is on the other side of the door, whether you're placing the order or delivering it. Some deliveries never truly end. If these stories unnerved you, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more real horror, and tell me in the comments, what's the creepiest experience you've ever had with a delivery? Until next time, keep your doors locked, your eyes open, and whatever you do, don't go inside.